Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Nasser Mashni, Robert Martin and Yousef Ahmed al-Rimawi. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Australia's only radio program that is totally dedicated to the Palestinian cause in English language. I would like to welcome our listeners on the AM dial and those who will join us later on 3cr.org.au/podcasts. In today's episode, we will have the second part of our apartheid discussion, and a very important, I would call it a breakthrough, a report by the United Nations on the question of apartheid in Palestine. So stay with us and enjoy the episode. Good morning, Nasser and Robert.
Good morning,
Yousef. Good morning, Nasser.
We spoke last week about apartheid, and during the week there was a very important report released from the United Nations subcommittee under the United Nations.
Do you think they heard our show?
They must have. They must have.
I think we can take full credit for the United Nations.
Well done, guys. Well done. Yeah, we should deserve
We'll just wrap it up then.
Yeah. And the report was very much so in line of the reality in Palestine, which is basically apartheid. It's titled Israeli Practices Towards the Palestinian People and the Question of Apartheid. And it was written by the Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. How good is that, Nasser?
Look, Yousef, it's phenomenal, and I think we should just make sure that you said basically, and as Palestinians, we've been too rarely given factual pieces of legal documentation. It's not basically what the authors, and these are esteemed people, Professor Richard Falk, who used to be the Special Rapporteur on the situation for human rights for in the Palestinian territories. Professor Virginia Tilley, who's has a PhD from the University of Wisconsin in Madison and has written countless number of books, as has Professor Falk. They've said conclusively, the report concludes that Israel has established an apartheid regime that dominates the Palestinian people as a whole. Aware of the seriousness of this allegation, the authors of this report conclude that available evidence establishes beyond any reasonable doubt that Israel is guilty of policies and practices that constitute the crime of apartheid as legally defined in instruments of international law.
Can I get you just to read that again, Nasser?
Yeah, it's a very important.
It's a really, and it's something that hasn't come out before from the United Nations.
Yeah, so the report concludes that Israel has established an apartheid regime that dominates the Palestinian people as a whole. Aware of the seriousness of this allegation, the authors of the report conclude that available evidence establishes beyond a reasonable doubt that Israel is guilty of policies and practices that constitute the crime of apartheid as legally defined in instruments of international law.
Wow.
It is a crime, and I'm glad the word crime was mentioned, because apartheid is not a natural disaster that we're hit by.
Or an act of God.
Or an act of God. Yeah. Apartheid is a man-made, and it's made by Israel, supported by the Western power, basically the Americans, and even Australia and us, Australia.
Absolutely. Well, they count Malcolm Turnbull as one of their great leaders.
So this makes us contributors
Complicit.
and complicits to the Israeli-made apartheid in Palestine. Yeah, so it's a very important report, and I think I want to encourage everybody, all my listeners, to go online and to look up the report. I'll remind them with the
we'll have it. We'll add it to the podcast so people can
to the
can
podcast.
find it.
But in the meantime, they can look up the Israeli practices towards the Palestinian people and the question of apartheid, which is a UN report, a subcommittee by the Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia.
Print it out and send it to as many people as you can.
Absolutely. Well, going through the report and just cherry picking the really important points that we spoke about last week, but they talk about Professor Falk and Professor Tilley. That one of the most prominent examples is the Israeli land policy, and the Israeli Lands Authority, which manages state land. And that accounts for 93% of the land which within the green line, the internationally recognised borders of Israel. And that land is closed to use, development or ownership by non-Jews. I mean, this is, we've known it. It's been a reality for Palestinians on the ground within, Israel proper, inverted commas, that there's 93% of the land they can't own, can't farm, can't access, whether it's because of residential committees that are ensuring that the moral fabric of the community is maintained, i.e. that it is Jewish. This is a fact. The demographic engineering, the Israeli law conferring Jews worldwide to the right to enter Israel and obtain Israeli citizenship. And we spoke about that, Yousef, last week with your brother and sister-in-law from Haifa. From Makkah, excuse me. Israeli citizenship is offered to Jews worldwide, regardless of where they were born. But the same policy is not afforded to anyone, regardless of their links to Palestine, and to the millions of Palestinian refugees, many of them, as we know, holding keys to their homes. This right is not afforded to anybody else.
Like you said, Nasser, these are things that we grew up into and we have experienced through with our first-hand experience, or with our hearing or witnessing cases like that. But for the United Nations to bring it in a legal document, and it's not that we needed that to really think that we were right thinking like this. No, it's just because for those who dismiss our argument and dismiss our struggle, to realize that this is not the Palestinian narrative versus the Israeli narrative. There's no such thing called, let's hear the two sides. We got to hear the Palestinians claiming that there is apartheid, and now the Israelis claiming that there's no apartheid, and therefore we are even. No, it doesn't work like that. There is the Palestinians, the rest of the world, except the complicits, and the United Nations versus Israel and the complicits.
Absolutely.
That's how it works.
Do you think this report will have a big impact? It seems the United Nations has never actually stated that Israel is an apartheid state.
On popular level, I think it would have good impact, and it would give the Palestinian struggle a momentum and credibility. But we've seen in several cases in the past, Israel accuses reports like this of one-sidedness or sometimes anti-Semitism. Am I wrong to say, am I right to ask if Richard Falk is a Jewish person?
Richard Falk is a Jew, South African Jew.
South African Jew, and therefore it's going to be a very hard argument to establish an accusation of anti-Semitism.
The reality,
they will try.
Of course, there's no question. And Israel doesn't care about the United Nations. And we've got to remember what the United Nations is. The United Nations is a properly constituted body of member states. It is funded by those member states. The biggest contributor to the United Nations is the United States. The United States chooses when it pays its bills and sometimes decides to pay very late and then give a little bit less.
Or to stop making the payment, like when the Palestinians joined the UNESCO in protest of that, they stopped making their payments.
Absolutely. So there's, the Congress passed a resolution that if Palestine was to become a member state, that they wanted to defund the UN. So the levels of pressure that the Israel lobby can apply to the United Nations to discount things like this. You remember the Goldstone report written by a Jewish guy following one of the Gaza slaughters was categoric that crimes against humanity were committed by the Israelis. But it all got watered down, and the reality is that nothing ever happened to it. Nothing ever went forward. Now, what reports like this do is embolden and empower civil society. So people like us can share this with our like-minded friends, with other advocates, and say, here's another piece of documentation that you can sit in front of your member of parliament, you could write a letter to the editor, you can do a university lecture and talk to this.
Or even something as simple as copying the link and paste it in a Facebook discussion, sometimes with the pro and anti. If this topic, it is a very important, like you said, for the civil society, for the struggle, on diplomatic level, on every level. And I think the time has come for the world to wake up and to call things with what their names are.
Absolutely.
The name of what Israel is doing to us is apartheid, and it is a crime, and it will no longer be endorsed by the world.
Do you think America will have a few comments about this? We know that Benjamin Netanyahu will, but
they'll just ignore it. Probably.
I want to ask Nasser.
They won't fan the flame, if you will.
I want to ask about what else in the report that we want to share with our listeners.
So the report talks about the strategic fragmentation of the Palestinian people as a principal method by which Israel imposes an apartheid regime. And it's got the separate laws. And in fact, it talks about 4 of them. And since 1967, the Palestinians as a people have lived in what the report refers to as 4 domains. And these are fragments of the Palestinian population. And they're treated differently, but share in common racial oppression that results from the apartheid regime. They are civil law with special restrictions governing Palestinians who live as citizens of Israel, the permanent residency law governing Palestinians living in the city of Jerusalem, military law governing Palestinians, including those in refugee camps living since 1967 under conditions of belligerent occupation in the West Bank and Gaza, and a policy to preclude the return of Palestinian, whether refugees or exiles, living outside territory under Israel's control. Domain 1, 1.7 million Palestinians who are the current citizens of the State of Israel, 20% of the population. Domain 2 is the 300,000 Palestinians in East Jerusalem. Domain 3 is the 6.6 million Palestinians who live in the occupied Palestinian territory, 4.7 of them in the West Bank and 1.9 in Gaza. And Domain 4 is the Palestinians that are outside.
The remaining of the population.
The involuntary exiles, you and I, Yousef, our children, your brothers, my cousins and family. And the report says that these 4 domains constitute a comprehensive regime developed for the sole purpose of ensuring that in the enduring domination over non-Jews in all land exclusively under Israel control in whatever category.
That's huge.
In parallel with that, they make the other domain for or access to worldwide jury to decide any time to make the aliyah to Israel and to be granted citizenship upon arrival.
Well, this is what the basis of apartheid is. Remember, as we spoke about last week, it's an Afrikaans word that means separate. And the thing, we keep running the parallel. In South Africa, there was a fountain that said whites only, and there was a fountain that said colours. There was a door that said whites only, a door that said colours, a bus that said whites only, a bus that said colours. Today, those doors, water fountains, and buses are determined on when you celebrate God. And if you are lucky enough to celebrate God on Saturday, you get the express lane, even the traffic lights, as we spoke about last week, Yousef.
I mean, we can ask them to shift the Friday prayer to Saturday if that solves the problem.
Well, these are separate systems, yeah? Separate systems. If you are a Palestinian in the West Bank, you are governed by military law. If you live in an illegal settlement, based on the United Nations resolution of last year, an illegal settlement on Palestinian land, and you do something wrong, you're administered by Israeli civil law, even though you're in a different country. That's apartheid. It's separate rules for separate people.
Not to mention that when they say that we'll give civil rule to the Palestinians in Israel, that there are also other hidden layers of discrimination against them. And when they say that we give permanent residency to the people of Jerusalem, also there is a long list of discrimination and difficulties that Jerusalemites only know.
Oh, of course.
So we can dig deep into every one of this and unpack the injustices inside.
What this report does.
I'm gonna have to take a song, and we will continue we will continue our discussion after the break. The song, we will definitely put the song for Khalto this week. It's by Sabah Fakhri, and
this is for you, Mum.
Yes, and it is by Sabah Fakhri, the Aleppo Syrian singer. And of course, the song is Fog El Nakhal, which was born in Baghdad. And now we're going to listen to it by a Syrian, a song that all Arabs love. You're listening to Palestine Remembered on 855 AM, and we are discussing the latest report by the United Nations, the Israeli practices towards the Palestinian people, and the question of apartheid. It is no longer a question, it's a reality, it's a fact of apartheid, Nasser.
No question. And one of the things that we have to always remember is Israel craves normalcy. Israel wants to be France. Israel wants to be New Zealand. Israel wants to be...
That's how it introduces itself.
Yeah, we're just like a normal country. Yeah?
Legitimate.
Now, the reality of New Zealand, Canada, Australia is these are also colonialist settler states that robbed the indigenous people of their resources, of their land, and committed massacres and horrendous acts of inhumanity to establish these supremacist cultures and societies. Now,
and speak on this point, one of the most absurd analogies the Israelis are doing in Australia is to say that we the Israelis are like the First Nation in Australia.
Yeah,
we are the First Nation of Palestine, and now we have a country, and so we have this in common with the Aboriginal community in Australia, which is absurd.
There's no question that's absurd.
But they are making this argument anyway.
So when we put in that context of Israel craving normalcy, where this report ends, and this is some of the strongest language we've seen out of the United Nations, and really throws the gauntlet down to activists and civil society to really take that next step. And the report concludes that the weight of evidence supports beyond any reasonable doubt the proposition that Israel is guilty of imposing an apartheid regime on the Palestinian people. And it says that member states have a legal obligation to act within the limits of their capabilities to prevent and punish instances of apartheid that are responsibly brought to their attention. More specifically, states have a collective duty: A, not to recognise an apartheid regime as lawful; B, not to aid or assist a state in maintaining an apartheid regime; and C, to cooperate with the United Nations and other states in bringing apartheid regimes to an end. And that is the clearest call you'll ever get from the United Nations for a boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign, which is something that we are very, very pro and very strong on, and we'd urge all of our listeners to adhere to.
Because this is a vehicle where the audience and the on popular level, that's what we can do. We will boycott any Israel-made products, especially the ones that are made in the settlements, and we will not accept the reality, and we will not let them get away with their crimes.
Yes, we've got to remember that South Africa wasn't brought down because Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher changed their minds. You know, there are pictures in Margaret Thatcher's home before she died, you know, and in Ronald Reagan's home and in the White House before he died, of them shaking hands with F.W. de Klerk, yeah?
Of course.
So these people were complicit in South Africa. They allowed, as we know, the Israelis helped South Africa create a nuclear weapons. But South Africa, apartheid in South Africa was defeated thanks to the resistance, in the first instance, of the ANC, the African National Congress, but also from the
International Solidarity
Movement. And they stood up and we boycotted the the Springboks, the rugby teams. We didn't do business with them. And slowly the people rose up. The mass mobilisation was channeled through these boycott efforts and divestment efforts, and they forced their representatives to start being accountable to what the humans wanted, the populace, their electorate. And it was those people that drove the change in agenda, to the point where Ronald Reagan was confronted by the head of the Congress and said, "You're going to go out and lose. Congress is against you, President Reagan. You need to make the decision and not be embarrassed by Congress." That's what took him to that.
It is definitely a case of apartheid in Palestine, and we will put the link of the report on the podcast episode, and also you can look it up now on your Google, Israeli Practices Towards the Palestinian People and the Question of Apartheid, a UN report. Now we're going to move to another topic. Our friend Robert is heading to the United States next week to join the protest against the AIPAC. Tell me more, Robert, about your upcoming trip to the United States.
Well, I went last year for the first time, and because I didn't know a lot about AIPAC, and I was bewildered.
We should say what AIPAC is for those who don't know it.
AIPAC's the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee,
which is the lobby group,
which is one of the strongest lobby groups in America. I was bewildered and surprised when I was walking around that nobody had actually heard of them. And the power that they swing in America using tax dollars and basically stealing money from America to fund the apartheid state of Israel. And so I went over there because they have a 3-day Congress.
We should just clarify what you mean by stealing that money, Rob, because currently there's something of the order of 20 or 30 million Americans on food stamps. So 1 in 10 American citizens currently doesn't have enough working money to feed themselves, yet the American government sends of the order of 3 to 4 billion US every year to Israel. And that policy gets pushed through by congressmen and congresswomen who are supposed to be representing their constituents and yet are sending US tax dollars to a foreign entity who have been found guilty of spying on them, etc., and all that sort of stuff. Now, the lobby creates the set of circumstances that money is actually, in fact, I'd argue, is stolen from the American
Absolutely, it is, because the people don't know that it's going there. And I think it's, 38 billion now that they've just signed off on. For the next 10 years,
Obama, this terrible, terrible friend of Israel, signed off on $38 billion in the last months of his administration.
And nevertheless, they're not grateful.
No.
They don't like him.
They were asking for 45, what?
Yeah.
The anti-Semite.
So you're going, Robert, in a few days, and you're telling me about your last year's presence.
So last year I walked around and I saw a lot of the people participating in the AIPAC convention. They had Donald Trump talking, and they also had Hillary Clinton, and so there was a huge stir of pro-people and anti-people of the rally. But I found it interesting talking to the AIPAC people and their stance on what they believe is right, and that they're doing everything they possibly can to make the Palestinians right. There is a huge racial supremacist feeling of those people, and they've stamped it as that's the 3 most important days a year for Israel's future, and this is sort of how they coin the idea of what's going on in there.
You're talking about these people were members of the Jewish community of America, or
they fly them in from over 50 countries in there, and they it's free because the American government pays for a lot of it as well, which is another.
So the people you're talking about are actually attendees of the AIPAC.
Attendees, and so whether they're students, whether they're professors, they're all different people trying to, I suppose, sing from the same hymn book. To start spruiking and doing all of those sorts of things. So I would have believed that this new UN report will be on the high, top of their agenda as well.
And it will be condemned as another
anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
And there's another reason I'll go there. There's an Israeli lobby and American policy forum done by the Washington Post, and they have some really, really fantastic speakers. They're going to have Ilan Pappé. They've got Hanan Ashwari, who's going to be there as well. And the opportunity to sort of spend time with them, I found really eye-opening. I'm going to spend some time with Max Blumenthal, who I want to ask some questions and get his life story on what's going on.
You should also speak. I know John Mearsheimer is going to be speaking as well, and he and another professor, Walt, they wrote the US and the Israel lobby about probably 12 or 13 years ago, and they exposed
the big paper.
it was a huge and a thoroughly researched paper with all the right attributions, but they really exposed the power of the Israel lobby over US foreign policy, and in fact detailed how US foreign policy has been hijacked by the Israel lobby to the detriment of American interests.
And that came out in a time that actually described in details the role of the Israeli lobby to drag America to the invasion of Iraq.
That's right.
And that was built on two premises. First, the weapons of mass destruction, and B, the support of Al-Qaeda, which both were proven a lie.
Yeah.
And Robert,
there's another man that...
Who else is talking?
There's another man I'm pretty keen to talk to, and it's something I hadn't heard about, which is the Palestine Papers, which came out a few years ago. I'm sure Nasser and Yousef know a lot about it. And he also was instrumental in the last Al Jazeera 4-part series to do with AIPAC.
In the UK.
Yeah, in the UK. So I thought that'll be interesting as well.
Last statement, Robert. Do you want to say something before we close this? Because we're heading towards the end of the show. Robert.
I'll have a lot of stories and information when I come back.
Yes, we will. We'll definitely be looking forward to talking to you, to hearing your reflections about your participation in the anti-AIPAC meeting.
And I also want to bring a whole lot of interviews back too.
Fantastic. So we'll look forward to hearing from those people. And just before we go, tomorrow night is our Olive Kids annual gala. I'm really pleased to announce that we're sold out. Another 400 people coming tomorrow night.
Well done.
Well done. All the best. Another successful year.
Yeah, fantastic.
So with this, we've come to the end of Palestine Remembered this week. We will be with you next Saturday. Nasser and myself will be with you next Saturday. Our friends, our friend,
international correspondent.
Our international correspondent will be busy collecting interviews from the United States
and frequent flyer points while we're here in Melbourne.
Love stuff.
So until we meet next Saturday, have a great time and salam.